Hey, this is a special episode. We got Meredith Gran, the creator of Octopus Pie. She's creating her first indie video game, or just video game in general. It's Perfect Tides. The game is currently on Kickstarter. It's already been funded, so this is your chance to get in on square one of of this new game, and not only help out it reach its stretch goals, but just get early access and kind of see. And we talked to Meredith not only about the game, but about ending Octopus Pie after its 10-year run. So, and it's always a good time having her on. So go ahead and check out the episode. And coming back on the show in a special episode, we've got Meredith Gran. She's recently just wrapped her, decade-long epic Octopus Pie, and now she's trading webcomic for point-and-click video game, kind of like the Sierra and LucasArts games of old, with Perfect Tides, the Kickstarter, which you can see in the episode link. We'll lead you right to it, and it really is kind of a love letter to that era, and it very near and dear to our hearts. It takes place right there in the early 2000s. Meredith, thanks again for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So what made you want to change gears and go from, webcomic to computer game?
Well, I've always wanted to do a video game, especially one in this genre, like the point and click. And it seemed like such a great method of storytelling that I'd never attempted before. And when I finished Octopus Pie, I really wanted to do a story from a teen point of view. And the more I thought about that and the more I developed that story in my head, the more it seemed like the adventure game genre would actually be perfect for it. So I started to gravitate more towards that than comics, and it really started to seem like a good idea.
So with this game, you're kind of, it's teenagedom, but the reference or the passage of time is marked by the seasons, a la Harvest Moon, I think is the closest thing I can kind of come up with. What is it about the teenage years that really kind of appealed to you as a storyteller, and after just wrapping up this kind of love letter to the 20s?
Well, I think after I was done writing about being in my 20s, which I knew someday that would happen, I started to think, what other experiences can I pull from that feel current and raw and vital to me. And my 30s didn't really feel that way. I'm kind of at the beginning of that. I haven't really experienced it, and I kind of still feel like it's a boring period of a person's life, just in terms of the things I can collect from it and tell stories about. I don't have that information just yet. So I started thinking a lot more about just being a teen, and a lot of those memories for me had begun to resurface. I don't know exactly what triggered it, just being a little bit older and, no longer seeing myself as at all in my adolescence. I think I've had more time to reflect on that period. So it seems like the perfect time for me to write about this.
Something you had mentioned, in the Kickstarter page, a lot of the identity crises that we all face. In the 20s, you were saying it was more externally driven. In the teens, it's more internally driven.
Mm-hmm.
Which always kind of, I don't know if I was wondering if you could speak to that, because I remember I was more affected by peer pressure and that sort of thing when I was in high school than, say, well, I guess early college I was still affected by peer pressure, but I felt like I was a little more existential in my 20s. I don't know if I had discovered Camus at the wrong time or maybe the right time. But yeah, what is it about? I want if you could speak more to that kind of that difference in dynamic.
Sure, and that's a good point that a teenager will externalize a lot of the things that they want people to think is true about themselves. Their identity, they wear it they try very hard to wear it so that they will appear a certain way. But for me, when I look back on teenhood, the way I distinguished that from my 20s, where I was definitely still doing the same thing, is that there was so much going on in my head that I didn't really have an outlet for. Maybe if I was a teenager when the internet is the way it is now, that might have been different. But a lot of the things that I was experiencing as a teenager seemed like I was the only person on earth experiencing them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably true of a lot of people when they're that age, that there's stuff that goes on in their heads that seems like it's just happening in a vacuum, and that no adult understands, no other kid understands. It's just yours to deal with. So those are the sorts of internal thoughts that I think I especially feel are very strong when you're a teenager.
Right on. There is something I noticed, so you've got some of the background art for a lot of those levels in the Kickstarter page and that sort of thing. There's a Blink-182 reference in the bedroom that's kind of in middle school and high school. Blink-182 is my shit. I saw those guys 7 times live, and I was just wondering, is that something that you had kind of devised, or was that something that the art team had kind of thrown in there?
Well, no, I gave that poster to Soren, the background artist, specifically because that was definitely one that I had in my room. There was something about Blink-182 that really hit me just right. It was this perfect amount of brattiness. Like there's a sense of humor to it, but the songs are also kind of anthemic and sentimental, and the way it was produced was just like candy to listen to. I really identified with that aesthetic, even though it was kind of not really speaking to me directly. It's kind of from a 13-year-old boy's point of view, most of it. But I really held strongly to that, and I mean, I guess that's true of a lot of teenage girls in general. I think that they identify with parts of the culture that are necessarily for boys, but they see themselves in it in some way. So I think when I'm designing the music for this game, which it's going to be a while until that happens, I definitely want there to be a pop punk of that era sensibility to it.
That is no pun intended, music to my ears, because that was to kind of speak to the 2000s time period. That was a band, as I'm sure you can recall as you're kind of doing research from your own memories and that sort of thing. It was like what? Deftones, Korn, Limp Bizkit, Godsmack, mm-hmm. and then Blink-182, and to a lesser extent Green Day, because that was before American Idiot and all that. That stuff was like a breath of fresh air compared to everything else out in rock radio those days.
That was what we were calling alternative at that time.
Yeah, just kind of the catch-all for everything post-grunge.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of story, in addition to just being set during the seasons and following the protagonist in their teenage years, what kind of story is the driving force behind Perfect Tides?
Well, it's a year in this character's life, and I think a year is a lot for a teenager, and it mostly it shows how her world on the internet and her world on the in real life sort of unfold. And I think this whole concept of there being an internet and a real life is maybe a little bit dated now, but it seemed very true in the year 2000 for me, that you had this online life if you were active on the internet at that point, and you had a real life that had absolutely nothing to do with that life. So I want to show how over the course of a year, this girl's online life unfolds in all these new and unexpected ways, all the drama and excitement of the community that she's a part of online, and then how the real world contrasts to that, how it affects her relationships in real life, and how she thinks of school and how she thinks of her future in general. So as the seasons progress, people come and go from her life, and she sees a lot of changes in herself, and she experiences a lot of new things.
One of the things that, you had mentioned drama and that sort of thing. One of the things that I always loved about Octopus Pie is you would get like these really just hilarious fucking moments in the book, but there would be moments that would catch you like a turnaround punch and just be like, oh, that shit's real. That hurts. That's okay. And I was wondering, are we going to kind of see a similar dynamic with Perfect Tides, though, to that point of a year seeming like a big deal, everything feels a little more heightened in high school, yeah? So,
oh, yeah.
So is it going to kind of be that to the nth degree?
Yes, absolutely. I definitely see it that way, because I think that a lot of what teens experience is simultaneously so hard and so sad, and so funny and so ridiculous in retrospective and just in the bigger scheme of their lifetime. So there will definitely be like a heightened sense of both drama and comedy about just about everything she experiences. I can't imagine reflecting on teen life without it being that way.
Sure. Now, with let's kind of focus on the Kickstarter a bit. You're kickstarting the game, and at the time we're recording this, it's already congrats. It's already it's hit its initial funding goals and hit the first stretch goal. I was wondering if you could speak a little more to the other stretch goals and some of the incentives to backers for the program.
Sure. So the stretch goals I keep them pretty simple. I mean, I really didn't want to go nuts with the incentives behind this because I want to focus on the game as much as possible, and accumulating more money beyond what I need was not my highest priority. So I really tried to tune it to what I thought I would need and what would really satisfy people. And I've never done a Kickstarter before, so I'm pretty happy with the results. The stretch goals that I had in mind for this game were firstly an OS X release on Mac simultaneous to the PC release, because it really seemed like that was what most people wanted. I'm a Mac user too, so I kind of enjoy playing it without an emulator as well. So we hit that one, which is great. I can now promise that to people. And then the second goal was that I'm doing, one of the incentives I'm doing is a mini comic, so relevant to people who are familiar with my work from that. And if I reach that goal, which I think we might at this point, I'll do that comic in color. So it's actually a higher quality bit of reward incentive that people are already getting. And then beyond that, when the pledges get a little higher, we go from the initial 30,000 to 50,000. I start commissioning translations of the game to other languages just to reach a broader audience. So that's really where we stand on the stretch goals. As far as the incentives, if you I'm actually like navigating to the page to see this. If you pledge at a pretty basic level, you get some digital incentives. You get a thank you from me. You get a PDF of the comic. I do send out postcards to thank people as well, which I'll be handwriting. And then if you go a little higher, obviously you get the game. You get potentially a T-shirt, a physical copy of the comic book. If you get like crazy high, there are there are like digital incentives, like you can be a part of the game, you can be a character drawn into the game, potentially with a speaking role. And the super nice physical item is like a collector's box I'm doing that kind of resembles what would that measurement be? It's a little bigger than a video box. It's like the box that you would get a computer game in the 90s. So I'm going to be designing a box with no game in it, but all of your cool stuff in it that resembles a box of that era that you can put on display if you're a really high tier pledger for this game.
It's kind of like almost like an art project at that level.
Yeah, absolutely.
So were you more King's Quest or were you more like Monkey Island?
I'm more King's Quest by far. And I know a lot of people are kind of projecting and saying that I'm making a LucasArts style game. There are definitely elements of LucasArts games that are going to be in this, but for me, all of the stylistic influence comes from those Sierra games. The emotional impact of those games, kind of like the lighthearted cheesiness that I really enjoy about those games. They have a particular voice that I really enjoy and that I think of as my primary influence.
There was kind of like a black humor that ran through that too. Like how many times and how many different ways could you gruesomely die in a King's Quest game? And they'd always have like a pun like, "Oh, I guess you lost your head." And it's like King Graham or whatever's clearly decapitated. The kingdom's in ruins.
Yeah, it's very cruel, and I think not all of the elements of those games stand the test of time. I don't think people have the patience to get into stalemates and die just for experimenting the way that a lot of those King's Quest games were made. So I'm not planning on putting death scenes into the game, and I'm also not planning on having any irreversible ways to lose. So that part, as much as I love it, I don't know that it meets the fairness standards of contemporary games. But I do want to take that sense of cruelty, especially the narrator kind of talking to the character and determining their fate and determining all their misfortunes. I definitely want to preserve as much of that as possible.
So it's almost like multiple and like different gradations of endings rather than just like, oh, you didn't do the exact right thing, you're dead.
Yes, exactly. Like you can be rewarded for good decisions, but not irreparably punished for bad ones.
Nice. I do remember frustratingly having to restart the game or load a previous save file, so that's always enlightening or endearing to hear. So how far along into because you had been working on this since at least like September, how far along is the game production-wise now?
Not far. I mean, it's early days still. I'm not anticipating the game is going to come out until late next year. So at this point, I've got the basic story outline. I've got a few of the sprite assets assembled, which I'm working through right now, and I've got a steady stream of background art coming in. But I wouldn't really say, like, I don't think we've reached a 10% finished point with this game yet. I think it's going to be a really long haul from here. So it's past the planning stage, I would say, and in the production stage, but it's early days.
How's it been working with Soren on kind of developing the visual look to the game?
Oh, it's wonderful. I mean, I couldn't be happier working with Soren. I think their sensibility kind of matches what I was hoping for. There's a whimsical style to the backgrounds. They feel very alive to me. And I think, I've had a pretty easy time communicating the tone that I'm going for with them. And Soren is bringing an incredible amount of imagination to it as well. So it's been really wonderful so far.
The Octopus Pie was something that you had kind of largely started on your own and really done on your own consistently since 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a video game, not even working with Soren, but working on the soundtrack, and now as you kind of expand and go deeper into the production process, it's like a much more collaborative, I mean, that's an understatement, a much more collaborative experience. How has that kind of gone from kind of working more or less in a vacuum to suddenly taking on a full-on team?
It's been a learning experience. I think working with a colorist for Octopus Pie really prepared me for it, because I started visualizing things beyond what I could possibly do with them. So I got used to describing how I see the tone of a scene. If there's a warmth to it, I have to be very specific about little details rather than just sort of vaguely sketching them out to the point of, just sort of being recognizable. I think I've had to expand the vision that I have for every scene and every idea in the game and be more specific without necessarily having to do all the work myself, which is an enormous relief. But I really do enjoy it. I think I'm able to make things that I wouldn't be able to do by myself, and I'm recognizing the power in that.
I would be remiss to get you on the show, Meredith, and not bring this up. And since this isn't, done through an image publicist, I know that this is true when I say it. Octopus Pie was legitimately like one of my favorite web comics of all time. And I was wondering like how it's been, because again, that's something that you had been working on steadily for 10 years, and here now suddenly there hasn't been new Octopus Pie since June, if memory serves.
Mm-hmm.
How is that kind of like looking back at that experience almost a year later? How has that entire part of your life been, and now moving on to the next thing creatively?
Well, thank you so much for saying that. I honestly can't say I miss it. I think I put it to bed exactly when I wanted to. I was ready to move on. a couple of years before I actually finished. I was ready to move on, and I never quite got sick of it, but I could see that I was about to get there. And since I shifted gears and stopped working on it, my fear was that I would still be experiencing things in my life and regretting that I didn't have Octopus Pie as like a place to toss those ideas and hash them out on the page. But as soon as I shifted to a different project, I found that I started collecting memories and more things related to that teen self that I wanted to write from. And I found that it was very easy to channel that energy into a new project. So I think it was the exact right time for me to let go and work on something else.
Yeah, kind of the idea that if Octopus Pie is about surviving your 20s and you're no longer in your 20s, there's almost something like disingenuous or something that, like, it feels like old news.
Yeah, I didn't want to keep on writing that way. I think even, the stories I was telling towards the end were specifically about transitioning out of your 20s and into that next stage of life. So beyond that, I would have to start writing about their 30s. There wasn't really anywhere else to go from there. And I kind of like the idea that, people in their 20s kind of think that turning 30 is the end. So I like the idea that is the end.
Fair enough. And everybody's kind of, Eve and Hannah and everybody kind of got their last ride into the sunset, and here we are with a brand new cast of ne'er-do-wells, but it's high school, so everybody is doing ne'er-do-worse.
Well, I can say real quick too. Sam and I, we do a lot of volunteer work with Image Comics and the last time we ran into Meredith was at San Diego, and I remembered like the Todd McFarlane line was starting to like wrap around, like the fucking
yeah,
the
that's right.
Yeah, but no, I can say, like, being next to him at all these different cons, I don't know if there is a greater champion for selling Octopus Pie than Sam Stone at cons. He really does truly love that book.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Let's not give away all my secrets.
Just one. That's one big one.
Well, I don't know how you do it, just that you're good at it.
Yeah, exactly. See, there you go.
It's just, it leads to my. I'm glad you bring that up, Jake, because it leads me to my next question.
Yeah. What
is it about slice of life, stories of self-discovery that really kind of intrigue you as a storyteller?
Well, I think they're sort of a form of meditation for the person telling them, and an opportunity to connect with the people who are receiving them. I think when you get a little farther into genres of fiction that aren't just comics about nothing, then there may be a different level of engagement that you have with your readers. I don't really know, because it's been a very long time since I've done anything like that. But when it comes to slice of life, I find that it's this perfect mix of fiction and reality that the reader never needs to know where that line is drawn, and you can be as truthful and confessional as you want to be, and you can also be as extravagant and bending of the truth as you want to be. And the response that you get to that a lot of the time is from people who have experienced the same thing as you. So they will often describe it back to you in a way that maybe you didn't even see, like they saw it from a slightly different angle. So I find that, maybe this is a selfish way to describe how my art works, but it is like a form of therapy where I describe these moments in life to an audience, and they describe it back to me, and it validates the thing that I described to them.
So there's a catharsis to it all.
Yeah, totally.
What is it about the setting perfect tides on an island? What made you literally kind of want to make the character an island unto herself, or on an island unto herself?
Well, there's definitely a sense of isolation that comes with it. I'm from Long Island, which I always found to be a pretty isolated place. Even though it is very close to the biggest city, I found that the culture there was kind of its own thing, and that it was sort of inescapable when I was a teenager. Going away from Long Island is, that's probably a permanent decision for me. And looking back at it, it did seem like a very small, inescapable place. And then Perfect Tides takes place on what I see as a subsection of Long Island, a smaller island that is part of Long Island. That is, it's vague exactly what it is, but the region is all part of that. So somewhere nearby, there is a major city, but right here, things are very isolated, and it's kind of, if you don't fit with the culture that exists there, then you're kind of stuck. So I think that's a lot of what I was thinking was that, and there's also like sort of a paradise aspect to it. When you think of an island, you think of all the beauty and idyllic features that it would have, and it does have those, but only for part of the year. So it really appealed to me, that idea of isolation in a paradise, with all the good and bad things about it.
Yeah, kind of. It's almost like would you call it almost like a Gilmore Girls scenario, Jake, where it's like everybody knows everybody and there's this like almost small town ennui? Really, any excuse.
Anytime I could talk about Gilmore Girls.
I forget. Are you team?
Jess.
You're team Jess.
Oh yeah, man.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Yeah. Is that kind of where you got the idea of doing the whole season thing? Because I mean, you could theoretically do just do it monthly, but yeah, you have it clearly defined by like spring, summer, fall, winter here in Perfect Tides. Did you kind of see like a year in the life and it was like that could work?
Well, there are parts of Long Island that are specifically seasonal, and in the summertime they are a tourist destination. They really come alive. They're the place to be. And in the wintertime, the only ones who are there are the souls who are able to live there. So it really whittles down the population for the rest of the year. So that was what I had in mind, that in contrast to the summer, the winter is like a complete barren wasteland, even though you're in the same place, and it's hard to imagine it being empty and undesirable in any way. But there are 3 seasons where there's nobody there, and the inhabitants have to survive in sometimes a hostile environment, and they have to find stuff to do to keep themselves entertained.
Is there what is the I suppose the big final boss? If is it like a home? Is it like a prom? Is it or what? Or more accurately, what season or what event kicks off the event of Perfect Tides, and where does it all culminate towards? Or is that
I could say we're beginning in the spring, where everything is sort of humming with excitement of the summer to come. There's an anticipation to it, and we end in the winter, where everything is very still and isolated. So I think that kind of goes perfectly with the arc that I see for this character. That there's all this anticipation for what's coming, and then there's the supreme loneliness and self-reflection that she's forced to do.
Kind of. The characters kind of whittle away as we start to get into the colder months, and then it just becomes our protagonist against her, really, if I can put on my psychoanalyst hat, as much against herself as the world around her.
Sure, yeah. She has to look directly at herself, and that's not an easy thing to do when you're young and lacking in self-confidence.
Fair enough. So, Meredith, I don't know if you recall, but something we ask everybody that comes on the show: what are you currently geeking out over?
Oh boy, what am I geeking out over? I'll have to think about this for a second. You can cut all the air time in between where I don't come up with an actual answer for you. Shoot, what do I like? You know what? I really liked Phantom Thread. That movie just like totally did it for me. I saw it as like a new classic for me. I was just it was just so refreshing to have a movie that I was able to think about for days and weeks after seeing it. So I think it did ignite that little part of my brain that gets really excited about something just existing, and that I get to experience it when it first comes into existence. So yeah, that's the one I would say.
Had you been a big Paul Thomas Anderson fan before?
Yeah, I really love his movies. I love getting immersed in the environments they create. They're very atmospheric to me.
Yeah, I'm the worst Paul Thomas Anderson fan because I have yet to see that movie, and I'm afraid I missed my chance in theaters. I feel like it's like if it's playing anywhere, it's like one showing somewhere 40 miles away. But yeah, I that's definitely on my radar. I really need to see that, and yeah, I need to check that out.
I think you can watch it at home, and I don't think it needs to be seen in the theater. You'll enjoy it whenever you get around to it.
I thought you honestly, Jake. I thought you had.
I
remember you were chomping at the bit. I was kind of like, I don't know. I've been like on a PTA downturn since Inherent Vice. Like that movie there were some fantastic moments, but that kind of as a whole.
What I also remember when we saw it, a guy fell asleep in the theater and like snored through half of it. Oh, yeah. And it was like the funniest thing in the world because like, I mean, like it's the worst thing in the world when someone falls asleep. Like when I go see the movie with my dad, and like if like my sister, me and my dad went to go see
Paddington 2?
No. My dad didn't see it with us. But like Justice League, and I leaned over to my sister and I was like, not if, but when Dad falls asleep, punch him hard because we're not going to be those assholes with a snoring old man. We have to deal with it. But I remember that like a guy just zonked out in the middle of it, and we were just like, oh god.
I'm a chronic movie sleeper. I nap. Like, I choose the moment where I know exactly how the plot is going to progress, and I just take a nap.
See, that's a talent, because, like, my dad is not...
You fell asleep during Jason Bourne.
Well, yeah, I am becoming my father, because I now... But see, I don't have that talent, Meredith, where I'm like, I know what's happening. I just wake up and go, where have I been?
Just disoriented.
Yeah, oh, no. Well, yeah, I have never fallen asleep in a movie before in my life.
That's the biggest consequence of going into our 30s.
Yes, yeah. That's what turning 30 is falling asleep in movies. Like, no. But no, I went to a military school, like a 2-year military school, and we had this like big parade where we marched through town or whatever. It was in Wayne, Pennsylvania, so everyone was like, hey, I don't know, play military school for a day or whatever. And one of the things was the movie theater. It was like, hey, you can see this movie or The Constant Gardener for free. And I don't remember what
always The Constant Gardener.
I don't remember what the other movie was, but I picked The Constant Gardener because I was like, oh, I like Ray Fiennes and stuff. Yeah, I passed. Yeah, I passed out in that one because I was tired. Like I blame that one on military school. So I was like, that's that.
To be fair, you can blame a lot on military school.
But no, but like I blame that on like that wasn't me being my dad. Like I was like legitimately tired. Like I can plan my life to see a movie and not fall asleep. But then I saw Star Trek 3 and Jason Bourne within 2 days, and I passed out in both of those. And I remember being like, I don't know if I can go to a movie theater again.
You're not gonna get your money.
Yeah, now this is a problem.
It becomes a $13 nap.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah.
So.
That's why you got to get the movie pass.
That's right, yeah.
Right. That's right. I'll see anything now. I don't care.
Check out Paddington 2.
Yeah, that is
Paddington 2 is awesome.
It's so good.
Oh, my God. It was so... Oh, I mean...
I would have paid for that one.
I mean, put Brendan Gleeson as Knuckles McGinty in anything.
Yeah.
And I will see that film.
It's like we've said a million times, it's a goddamn delight.
But like Movie Pass, you can see stuff like The Commuter and feel like, I sat there for a while and it was relaxing. I didn't think about work and saw the dullest thing ever.
Is that the Liam Neeson train one?
Uh-huh.
Oh, nice.
It's supremely dumb.
Supremely dumb.
It's like nonstop, but he's not on a plane this time.
Yeah. Now he's on a train.
Mm-hmm.
Next, it will be automobiles.
Yeah. Yeah. He does beat a man to death in Taken with an automobile, or a door to an automobile.
I was about to say, I think if you beat someone to death with an automobile, that's just running them over with an automobile.
Yeah. He uses the door. That was misuse of words.
So, one more question I have, I guess, before we tie it back to Perfect Tides and release you back to the wilds, there's a change of format in Octopus Pie where you kind of go from the horizontal, like Calvin and Hobbes-esque, and then volumes 4 and 5 are upright. Was that as a result of coloring the stories?
No, it was kind of me being a little stubborn and down on myself because I had been dropped from my publisher. I was before Image. I was published through Random House, and after the first book came out, they were not seeing the kind of sales they wanted for it, and I kind of got into this, into my head that, well, that's it for being published. I'm a webcomic. That is my lot in life. The print thing is, if I want to do print, it's going to be self-publishing from here on out. And I started thinking less about the connotations of how this would appear in a book and how marketable it would be, and more about, well, what can I do to make this comic more interesting for myself and feel less disillusioned about the fact that, I'm kind of alone in the world doing this comic, that nobody cares about it as much as I do. So I was a little dramatic about it in those days. So I realized that, a lot of the kind of storytelling I did, when you do it in the horizontal format, it's a little harder to surprise people. You can have horizontal action, but you can't have vertical action very easily unless you do it at like the right hand side of the page and forfeit a lot of the second tier. So I found that the vertical style, it's easier to convey both horizontal and vertical action, and also have things that people's eye won't immediately land on, that they might take a second to actually see. So in terms of storytelling, I think there's a lot more you can do with that.
Right on. Yeah, I was always kind of wondering, because I was like, I'm like, well, I don't mean to make light of people that actually have this, but like in an almost kind of like OCD way, on the bookshelf, it's like, cool, volumes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like it was all...
I know. I feel bad, and I don't like the way it looks either, but I'm just so happy with how those pages turned out. I think that ended up being the best work I did on the comic, and I partially have the vertical style to thank for that.
There's something that kind of ties into the nostalgia thing. I think it happens in volume 4, and now I think about it, when Hannah gets sucked into like the nostalgia world, and you and she's just like, do you remember us? And she's like, yes, like her eyes turn like Requiem for a Dream huge and everything, and she's just like, yes, I remember everything. And you kind of like, there's something about, and I don't know if it's because of like all the BuzzFeed quizzes or anything, like only early 2000s kid knows this, like where you're seeing like, remember when you couldn't be on the phone and be on the internet at the same time or whatever, or like the AOL CDs that were basically, I'm trying to think, like those things were fucking everywhere. You would get them in the mail. You'd get them. They would be at Blockbusters. They'd be at Targets, Walmarts, everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Is it just kind of, what is that? What kind of nostalgia or romanticism do you kind of transfix on this time period that Perfect Tides, and I mean, clearly it all speaks to that period where we are that age, yes, but like, what is it about that aesthetically that you really wanted to capture here?
I think I don't know that it relies so much on the aesthetic so much as the feeling that it gave me, and then I can use the aesthetic to kind of invoke that back. But to me, like, connecting to the internet was like this little form of salvation. And you guys probably remember just having like a phone-based modem, and it didn't always successfully connect in like the early days of or like the peak days of AOL. Through phone modems, it was often like a busy signal.
Yeah.
So you would sit there and just wait for your life to get better, like wait for the freedom of the internet to come to you. And there were so many things that it seemed like were keeping you from the internet. Like, and in my house, if somebody had to use the phone and it was a big family, you can't get on. So you got to wait until the early morning and late at night when you're truly alone in order to connect to it. And sometimes you get punished. Your parents take the internet away from you, and you're taken away from this world that you feel like you need in order to live. And there are images associated with that, like you hear that welcome, you hear like the modem actually connecting the way it's supposed to connect. It's like a subtle difference from it not successfully connecting. And I want to try and give people that feeling of like, welcome to this world. You're entering this world that takes you away from the world that is seemingly not providing you with everything you need. That's the kind of nostalgia I want to create. I don't engage with the internet the way I used to, but if I look back at those images, I can sometimes remember what it was like to be that excited about using it and interacting with those people.
Yeah, I mean, we take it for granted so much now, but I mean, we all literally have like these pocket devices where virtually anywhere we can get it. But yeah, I remember, and of course, the most horrific thing is like if you suddenly heard your mom's voice through the computer screen, and you'd just be like, "Oh no!" As you're getting dragged off the internet.
No. But also, like the best thing was like you were saying, Meredith, like hearing that tone where you're like, "We're in,"
like it was fucking Tron.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, that was the best. But then if you tried like on a Saturday when it was really busy, no, you're not getting in. It's not happening.
No, and you try 100 times because what else are you going to do? You're just desperate to get on there.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, part of what this character is dealing with too, is like her computer breaks and she has to fix it. Like all these barriers exist that keep her from her internet. So I definitely want to recreate that feeling of gratitude, of relief, of being able to get on there.
The great escape.
Mm-hmm.
That's the perfect tides. Probably not. I mean, I'm probably reading too much into that title right there, or that metaphor. But no, it's kind of there.
No. That was not the basis behind it. My husband has yet to actually sit me down and watch that movie, but to her it is a great escape.
Fair enough. All right. Well, Meredith, while we got you on, anything you want to plug other than the Kickstarter?
Man, let's see. How about an end to capitalism? Can we do that?
Hell yeah.
All right. Subscribe to An End to Capitalism, and hit that like button.
There you go. And, of course, volumes 1 through 5 of Octopus Pie are out in comic book stores everywhere and digitally on Comixology and ImageComics.com. And, of course, the link to the Kickstarter will be right there in the episode description. Meredith, thanks again for coming on the show.
All right. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.